Welcome once again to Andrew White and Reflections. A bit of a sad occasion, Andrew, this week because a dear friend of yours has passed away. He was found in a barn in the southeast of England, and it appears that he had taken his own life. Now, there's a lot going on here because he got married about 5 years ago to Lady Gabriella Windsor. She's somewhere in line to the throne, and he has been with royalty for many years. And in fact, there's a glorious picture some months ago in Ascot where the King and Queen were with him and Ella, as she's known to her friends.
Yes, Ella is Ella.
Yeah, and they were having a great time. And he was a very special person to you because you were both in Iraq, weren't you?
He was the only one of my project officers who had ever stayed at it on his own for years. He didn't just come for a few weeks. He was with me at least 6 years at the most dangerous points of time in Iraq. And it's quite funny because he was always extremely attractive to the women, and he always used to have women chasing him. But I couldn't believe it when he finally got engaged to Lady Gabriella Windsor. She was the daughter of Prince Michael of Kent. And Prince Michael of Kent was actually a very good friend of mine. He'd been the patron of our organization at one stage, and I used to go and see him regularly. In fact, I never forget the first time that Tom met his future father-in-law was with me at Kensington Palace. And I haven't seen a lot of Tom recently. Since the wedding, I've only spoken to him once or twice. But he was a man of great strength, great belief, great character, and a man who was really committed to reconciliation. I remember one day having a football match on the lawn of the Al Rashid, which was one of Saddam's old palace hotels. And it wasn't very politically correct. We had all of our young people playing soccer. So we played Christians against Muslims. And the Christians were winning. And I said, they've got no strong players. And Tom said, never mind. I'm going to join the Muslims and I will be their target and I will be able to equal things out. And so he then played for the Muslims, and within about half an hour, we were, instead of being 3-1 to us, we were 3-all. So that was my example of Tom being a real reconciler.
Well, everybody seemed to like him.
They did. Everybody liked him. I never had anybody say we don't like him. Even the Ayatollahs and the Imams and the soldiers. And he used to help me in my chapel services. And he was absolutely great. And I loved him so much. And when you see something like this happen to somebody who is such a person of faith, It's just devastating. And yet we know that our Lord says he will never leave you or forsake you. And I know that applies for Tom as well. Tom came from an extremely godly Christian family, very much part of what I often used to refer to as the clan, those called, loved, and named by God. But you can't use that term in America. They don't take very nicely somebody talking about you having a clan. But I don't know what suffering his wife and family must be going through. And I have had no contact with them, so I don't know what's happening. And I desperately want to see them. And I love them so much. But all I can say is, Tom must have been desperate to do this action. I don't know why or how, but all I know is that God has not left him. It doesn't matter if somebody takes their own life. God will never leave them. And I know without doubt that my Tom was a man of great faith. And the fact that he married Ella, who was the most beautiful, dynamic person herself, was a sign of God's grace. But Tom, rest in the arms of your Lord. And I just thank God that I know I will see you again one day.
All his friends are saying nobody had an inkling that this was about to happen.
No, they didn't. Nobody. And that just shows the severity of mental illness. People don't even know that you're suffering. And having been a medic so much of my life, I always say that mental illness is far worse than the most terrible of physical ailments. At least medically, we can cut parts out, we can stitch things together, we can give horrible drugs, and sometimes people get better. Increasingly, they do. But when you've got serious mental health problems,
Yeah, you can't hold your broken arm up and show people a plaster. People don't realize what's going on inside.
but I know that my Tom, the most wonderful person I've ever had working with me, my Tom Kingston, is with my Jesus, who is the Father, Son, Forgiver, life. And in Isaiah, we see so many comforting words about even when everything is against us, he is still there. And all I know is my Lord's arms and his angels around my Tom now. And I pray for his beloved family, his very, very Christian family, and for Prince Michael's family, also a wonderful family. And I love them all, and I just say to them, here I am. I will do anything for any of you at any time.
Andrew, it's been particularly difficult for you because you lost your brother, didn't you, in the same way?
Yes, my younger brother when he was 30. People always look at me and think, oh, well, you must have had it so good in your life. You know, you trained at the best medical school, went to Cambridge University, ended up in good jobs, so you must have had it all so good. The fact is, I didn't have it all so good. And my brother really struggled. I had a brother who wasn't a good brother. He was a kind of football hooligan gone wrong, who got into drugs, ended up in prison, came out completely restored himself, got into classical art, and then one day in his depression, he went off to the white cliffs of Dover and jumped and killed himself. And I never forget that day because it was exactly the same day that Princess Diana was killed or died in the car crash. And I was doing a service, a remembrance service for her, because I had various members of her family in my congregation. And just as I was preparing to do the blessing, 2 police walked in and said, we've just found your brother's body. And then I had to go and share that information with my parents. And then I had to eventually take his service. So I know what it's like. And in a way, I don't regret that that happened because it enabled me to cope with other people who had been through that suffering. And the worst thing that can happen to any family is to have one of their loved ones caught in suicidal activity. But one thing I know that God does not forget them. He is there.
An epitaph of a strange variety, again, from his friends, because as you say, he had a lot of lady friends. He was a real charmer in the nicest sense. And that helped, obviously, when dealing with hostages and their release. But every one of his girlfriends, when they parted their ways, didn't have a bad word to say about him, quite the contrary.
I know. And I knew some of his previous girlfriends, and they were real troopers as well. He had the most wonderful people.
When we can't see any sense, Andrew, what do we do? Do we just trust?
All we can do is trust and obey. For our Lord is always there and always the same. And he will never leave us or forsake us. Just trust and obey.
And of course, he has experienced everything, even to the cross.
Yeah. Been there, done it, and that's what this Easter period was all about.
Andrew, thank you so much. It's been very sad the last few days, but we can think back on the good things and the good experiences we've had with people.
Blessings to you, my dear Rodney. I will speak to you next week.